Greetings, blade fans. This old sword is back with you once again. And what have we got today? Something unique. I try to put different, unique things out there for you. And certainly they come my way because I'm interested in them and see them at the various websites or advertised. And I think about it and either push the button or don't, you know how it is, right? Well, this one came from the Knife Center, and it is a design by Les George. And Les George is a custom knife maker. He also has many other talents, apparently, and including devising equipment for, checking for mines and whatnot on the battlefield. This is a part of his mid-tech series. So what is a mid-tech? Well, it's partially mass-produced and partially custom, either assembled or made. So you'll see that this comes in a leather sheath, and I wanted to leave the sheath on before we look at the knife. Notice the CLW. So this is Chattanooga Leather Works, that very well-known company that does exquisite leather sheaths. You can see how smooth the welt is on this sheath, and the stitching's fantastic. And if you could only smell that leather. Yes. This comes set up with a synthetic strap, very strong rubberized fabric underneath strap. It's considered to be a boot knife, but this is not designed to fit in the boot, but more in the belt inside the waistband. So we've got a one-way snap there. These are all removable by way of the 4 screws. I found that those screws needed to be loosened just a little bit, the ones on the top there, in order to easily get the knife in and out of the sheath. And we're going to do that. There you go. A little bit of drag, but it is securely in there when it's in there, which is important, right? So here you can see it does say George 3V. So it's a CPM 3V steel, very tough and very wear resistant. This one, and there are other choices. And by the way, you can swap the handles out for $35 a pair by buying them directly from Les. I kind of like these. I wasn't sure at first, but the orange and black shows you the pattern much more than the solid black does. And then there's a black with a different mill pattern on it. But this has a name, and forgive me for forgetting the exact name of the milling pattern. But there you have it in front of you at any rate. It is a 4-inch boot dagger, quote unquote, on the boot, because you may or may not stick it in your boot. You may or may not wear boots, but this definitely can be hung in the sheath a number of different ways. You could even put some sort of a rig to carry it upside down in a shoulder rig. You could put it inside the waistband, which is the most logical way. These screws will also accommodate probably a tech lock if you wanted, be kind of bulky, or something like a DCC clip or Ulti clip or what have you. So you don't have to stick with this. You can swap it out. And he also makes a Kydex sheath. Now, this knife wasn't offered with a Kydex sheath, but I kind of like the value that the leather gives and the look of this knife. Just the way it is. It's, old school, back when all the fixed blades came in leather sheaths and there was no Kydex being used. We've got 4 screws. Really, I'm sorry, 2 screws, right? Because they release on one side. And you can easily take these scales off and replace them with a black pair or whatever, maybe even a custom pair of your choice. But I like it the way it is. Beautiful palm swell in the middle. Gives you a natural guard, whether you want to use this scalloped out area here for a pinch grip, right? And hold the blade laterally. It's not an EDC knife, folks. It's going to cut for sure, and it is quite sharp, even with those shallow grinds on the blade, and it is quite piercing. So yes, it's a dagger. It is the smaller version of the large George dagger made by Spartan in more of a combat style, I think like a 6 or 7 inch blade. Let's measure this up since we're talking about sizes, and I'm going to put some other dagger style blades out there for you to look at as well. I think we're going to need to back out just a little first before we do this. Okay, overall length is, we're going to call it 8 3/4. And the blade length right to the guard is 4 inches with, if you need to know, cutting edge of around 3.6. Moving on, if I can get my caliper here, in inches at the fattest part of the handle, and it is contoured, 0.64. And if we grab the blade right there, we get a 0.16. And in millimeters, we get 4.3 millimeters. So he starts off with a pretty hefty blade stock, which is great because that point comes down to a pretty fine point. Understand these are all CNC milled on a one-off basis. Again, that's the extent of the info I have. I'll try to provide you some links so you can look into what Les George is making at his website, as well as the price on Knife Center. And these are coming in around 3 1/4, by the way. So it's 5.48 ounces, rounding up. And we'll take another look and do some comparisons. Got a standard sort of a flat head on one side here, slightly raised. Some people like that because it gives a different feel on each side, but we've got a perfectly symmetrical blade, so it's really not going to matter which way you hold this knife, and that's one of the beauties of a dagger style knife, is you got edges on both sides. So no matter how you're holding the knife, you have an edge forward and you have an edge backward. And with a 4 inch, it's just about perfect if you wanted to employ this as a pical knife. And we have a nice crest, what kind of a double chamfer at the top here that accepts the thumb perfectly. So that gives me a perfect 90-degree angle to my forearm for all of your point down work. If you chose to use it point up, either this way or this way, it fits very nicely. And these ridges here that are cut in give you a really nice grip, particularly side to side. You're not going to slip. A little smoother up in here, but we do have jimping in the rear side near the pommel, and jimping here, which is a little on the smooth side, but right here at the edge, we've got lots of traction from the way they milled this. You got these little pointy things there. Beautifully done knife. It may or may not be a carry piece for me. I didn't have any of Les's knives, so I figured, this was a good opportunity to get one that wasn't a full custom. So there is the Galvo, and if I didn't mention the name, it is the Galvo, named after a galvanometer, I believe. If I said that right, if I didn't, feel free to correct me. Other dagger style knives that I have: Bastinelli, Tellem. How about that for a handle that's the same size, but a blade that's maybe 60% of the size of that one? How about this dagger, if I can get it out, from NC Customs? This is the Spectre dagger. All sort of falling into the same size range there. And what else do I have? I had one more. Here we go. The Tops Ice Dagger. And ICE stands for in case of emergency, is what Tops is saying. So there's a good size comparison for you. The Galvo is actually the longest of the bunch. All different blade profiles, wider blade, very narrow blade, wider blade, and a very short wide blade on the Tellem. This is Featherlight blade, by the way, with micarta. Coming in around 300. None of these are cheap, although I think this was just a bit over 100. And this guy here from Tops is maybe just a bit over 100, reinforced point and all with the ring. Thing about the rings, I've mentioned this before, if you do choose to use the ring, it's going to angle that knife so that you don't have a direct thrust with the point in this position. You may consider the ring to only be a way to extract it quickly from the sheath, and that's not a bad idea. Otherwise, you may want to simply hold it without using the ring. In that way, you see, you can get a 90-degree purchase on it. As soon as you put your finger through the ring, since that ring is on center, the knife becomes angled off and becomes, in my view, less useful. Let's get some of these other guys out of the picture. And just for size comparison, how about putting the Griptilian in there? I always like to use the Griptilian because most of you know the size of the Griptilian. You've either got one or maybe you've had one. So overall, it's about 3/4 of an inch longer than the Griptilian and got a blade about a 1/2 inch longer, roughly. This being about a 3.5 inch folder. All the rest of them come with Kydex sheaths, so this is unique in that it comes with a leather sheath, but you got the option of a Kydex sheath for, I think, about 35 bucks. So I think they're about 35 bucks for a pair of the scales if you want to swap these out, and about 35 bucks for a Kydex sheath. This sheath from Chattanooga Leather, if you were to have it made, would be at least, I think, 100 bucks, somewhere in that vicinity. Beautifully, beautifully made. And, it doesn't add that much thickness to the knife because really you're talking about the handle being, I knew I'd drop it, the handle being about as thick as the sheath, roughly. So with the knife in the sheath, right, you got, yeah, in through here maybe a little thicker because of the double welts. But you can pull that out very nicely. And again, if you get one of these and it's crazy tight, just back off on these 2 screws slightly. It also allows you to swivel the belt loop. And they're long threads, so there isn't too much danger of the screw falling out. Of course, you could always Loctite them in. But just some beautiful work from Chattanooga Leather. It's too bad I've got some customs that need sheaths, and Chattanooga does not do custom sheaths anymore, but I believe Oak City Leather does, and they were recommended to me by Chattanooga Leather. Got a lanyard hole here, and again, check out that contouring. Beautiful contouring, swells in the middle. I mean, this is just as it should be. The pinky has a smaller circumference, and the middle 2 fingers have the larger, and that goes into the palm. So If you're a colliest or you're just familiar with double-edged daggers or what have you, it's a beautiful little knife to manipulate. Cerakote on this, by the way, over the 3V. That information comes from Les's site. So there it is, the Galvo boot dagger by Les George, a mid-tech, coming in around 3 1/4, not cheap, from the Knife Center. And I believe they've got a few more out there. So let me know what you think. And don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe. I'll be back soon.